Next up, our next guest speaker is Andy Fleming. And Andy Fleming is the CEO and co-founder of the Developmental Edge at the research and consulting home of the Deliberately Developmental Organization and the Developmental Sprint. Andy has worked in leadership and organizational development for over 30 years in both corporate and consulting roles, and he's also the co-author of his firm's widely acclaimed book, And Everyone's Culture, named as the best management and workplace culture book of 2016. So Andy, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to have you. And the stage is yours.
All right. Thanks, Penny. It's great to be with you and everybody here who's come to engage in the good work and the kind of feast that you've prepared for us, Benny. So gratitude to you for that. Glad to see folks here. And what I'd like to do is to go ahead and share my screen here just to give you a sense of what we're going to be up to. So the title of my little micro workshop, I'm calling it, is Making Your Development a Team Sport, Applying Developmental Intelligence. And we'll talk more about that as we go to your work and life now. So as Benny mentioned, I'm the CEO of the Developmental Edge. This is our book, And Everyone Culture. Really, our mission is about scaling human development, scaling it in organizations and beyond as well. So you can read more about us if you're inclined at developmentaledge.com. So I want to offer a couple of starting thoughts here. I want to suggest that beyond a great place to work is a great place to grow. And I had the privilege, as Benny mentioned, I've been in organizational and leadership development for over 30 years. I had the privilege of working with some organizations to help them get to the top of the great place to work lists in the US. Fortune magazine named one of my clients actually #1, best place to work in America some years ago. And all that was wonderful and a great thing for that organization and a great thing for me. And about 10 years ago, had a kind of epiphany that in the 21st century, it's not enough to be a great place to work. That's really table stakes today. That what's really important with the rapid pace of change is being a great place to grow. And so it started with this sort of idea and met up with Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy, who are renowned faculty, researchers, authors up at Harvard, who had written a book called Immunity to Change and had some ideas related to this. My wife, Claire Lee, who's a business partner, as well as my wife and a developmental coach, and I reached out to Bob and Lisa. One conversation led to another, and we wound up creating this entity that we call the Developmental Edge. And it's about helping to scale human development and create great places to grow. I want to also suggest that beyond employee engagement is employee development. That if you go for engagement, and nothing wrong with going for engagement, engagement's a great thing. May we all have more employee engagement in our workplaces and organizations, in our lives. We want to suggest if you go for development, you also get engagement, but you get something more as well. You get people growing in a way that they wouldn't otherwise grow. And the last starting thought I want to suggest is beyond emotional intelligence. Again, may we all have more emotional intelligence. Brilliant concept, wonderfully articulated by Daniel Goleman and others, and incredibly important for leadership and organizational development. And I want to suggest that's one capability. And what developmental intelligence is, it's the capability to develop new capabilities. So it's the capability to become more emotional intelligent. It's also the capability to develop yourself in other ways as well. And we'll talk more about that as we go. So want to suggest starting today, starting right now, starting this moment, some people, some teams, some organizations are going to get a little better. That's just what happens. In the research is school kids, kids in school, they grow, they get a little bit smarter, they do a little bit better. But are there ways for those school kids and us to get better faster? And so starting today, a few will get better faster. They'll get onto that orange curve. And what are they doing differently? They're applying developmental intelligence. And this is kind of a big lesson that we learned in our book, is that there are some organizations that are on the edge of this that are actually using, in one form or another, more consciously or sometimes not as consciously as they might, but they're applying the principles of developmental intelligence to create a kind of incubator for everyone to grow. Not just some people, not just high potentials, not just senior leaders, but for everyone at all levels of the organization. And given the rapid pace of change, given the circumstances that we're in today, where we're all stretched in new ways, I want to suggest that knowing how to accelerate the growth of yourself, knowing how to accelerate the growth of other people, and also knowing how to be an accelerator for your team or your organization is a critical dimension today. So we're going to focus on, for the next little bit, we're going to focus on what it means to accelerate the growth of yourself. And going to actually sort of do a little bit of a survey here. And so we're going to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes doing a little bit of reflection and some dialogue, if you're inclined, in terms of what curve you're on now, whether you're up more on the black curve or whether you're more on the orange curve, whether you're more deliberately developmental or perhaps not so deliberately developmental. So I want to suggest from our learning, from our book and other research, is that the developmental intelligence for yourself has these elements to it. It means focusing on one specific improvement goal at a time. It's not taking on multiple improvement goals. Those, you may develop those as a sidelight to the one that you're mainly focused on, but we've learned one at a time. If you go deep on that, it's also going to impact others. It's bringing to the surface and engaging limiting assumptions, our old ways of thinking that hold us back. So for instance, if we want to get better at delegating, then we might have some old assumptions that if I delegate, they're always going to screw it up. Or if I delegate, I won't get the credit. Or if I delegate, they're going to resent the fact that I'm delegating and not doing the work myself. Those are old limiting assumptions that we can bring to the surface and test. We'll talk more about that. It's making development a team sport. So it's not trying to develop yourself and just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's using other people to help you to develop and grow. And just a side note, I can tell you I was applying this lesson in the work that I did to prepare for this presentation as well. And without a little team of people around me at the Developmental Edge, what you would be experiencing now would be much more diminished than what I'm presenting to you. It's writing down your reflections and insights so that you're keeping track. And what we found is even just 5 minutes of just reflecting a little bit a day and capturing your thoughts, your insights, can actually help to sort of deepen and extend your learning and make it sticky. And it's holding a developmental mindset. We'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. So I'm going to actually invite you to do a little survey here. And for each of those 5 dimensions, I'm going to ask you to reflect on 3 items and then to think to yourself and score yourself on a scrap piece of paper or, electronically, however you want to do it, but score yourself. Does that item, is that descriptive, not at all of me? Is it sometimes me, often it's me, or wow, yeah, that's always or almost always me, okay? So we're gonna go through each of those 5 elements and we'll start here with the first one, focusing on a specific improvement goal. And so I'm just going to read these items here and invite you on a scratch piece of paper just to pick out the number. So first item, I took concrete action or actions on a self-chosen, so something I chose, improvement goal in the past week. Okay, so is that you? Sometimes, often you do that? Or wow, I do that pretty regularly. Okay. Second one, I have a specific improvement goal I'm working on right now. Okay, is there something that you're working on this week, today, that you could name if someone were to ask you? And the third one, I use a regular process. I have a regular way, a repeatable way to identify and choose high leverage improvement goals to work on. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to go ahead and total up your scores for those three items. And if you would, let's just see if you could, if I allow you to put those into the chat. If you could just put your score, so your score should be anywhere from 3 to 12. If you could just go ahead and put that in the chat, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I see 7. All right. Yep. All right, got 11. Fabulous. Okay. So 7s, 8s, 10s, and 11s. Okay, terrific. So let me offer a couple thoughts then for this item, choosing one improvement goal at a time. If you were closer to the 3 or 4 than the 11 or 12 range, my hope is that what I'm about to share will be helpful to you, and we're going to do similar kind of drill for each of these areas. So you could ask yourself, what are the biggest challenges and or opportunities on your plate right now? So our previous speaker was referencing monsters that we're facing. And so what are the biggest challenges or opportunities on your plate right now? What's on your plate right now? What's up for you right now? And then to ask yourself, what one thing, if I were to get better at it, would make a big difference given what's on my plate right now? So what's one thing I could work on? Maybe it's one thing about asking for help. Maybe it's about taking more time than I need to rest and refresh myself. Maybe it's getting better at collaborating with others. Maybe it's getting better at developing new business for myself. What's one thing, if I were to get better at it, would make a difference? And you could ask trusted others, other folks in your circles, what would they recommend if you were to say, you know me pretty well. You've observed me. If you were to suggest one thing I could work on, what would it be? Okay, so that's for focusing on one specific improvement goal. All right, we're going to move on. Second area, surfacing and engaging limiting assumptions. So same drill for this. I've tested a self-limiting assumption in the past week. So I've actually identified and I've done a little experiment on that self-limiting assumption. So 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'm planning to test a self-limiting assumption this week. And I use a regular process to surface old assumptions that may be self-limiting. Okay? So once again, total that up, and I encourage you to keep track of your sort of running total, if you will, because we'll tally up all 5 columns in just a couple of minutes. Okay? So if you would, go ahead and enter into the chat again. Yeah, a little bit lower on this. Yeah, and this is Tammy, 9, great, 8, okay. So this is sort of one of the kind of discoveries that our colleagues up at Harvard, Keegan and Leahy, have made in the last 20, 25 years, that we all have a kind of immunity to change. We all have kind of a psychological immune system that operates in the same way or an analogous way as our biological immune system. That when we try new things or think about trying new things that really are a stretch for us, that are like adaptive challenges as opposed to technical challenges where we really have to grow and try new behavior or even adopt a new mindset, that we typically kick up sort of old hidden commitments and old hidden assumptions that may be holding us back. So identifying those and testing those can be enormously valuable. So let me go back to the screen here and offer a couple thoughts for no matter what your score was, that you could ask yourself as you think about that one big thing, what scares or worries you the most about changing your behavior? What is it that you think about, wow, if I were to actually do some different things, what's the worry that comes up for you? And a way to get at that is to kind of complete this sentence. If I were to make this behavior change, then what are the bad things that are going to happen? Okay. And what small experiment, when we work with folks, we say, typically, safe, small, specific experiment can you do to start testing one of your assumptions? If you're inclined, mentioned the book earlier, see chapter 6 of An Everyone Culture. We walk you through Keegan and Leahy's immunity to change process in chapter 6. Okay? Let me move on to the next section. So this is perhaps the biggest insight that we've gotten from our consulting work in the last 2 or 3, 4 years around the idea of being more deliberately developmental, is making development a team sport. In the past week, I had an accountability conversation with someone on a self-improvement goal. So I talked with somebody about this goal and what I was trying to do on it, or I talked with them, told them about an experiment that I might have done. So 1, 2, 3, or 4, I know the current improvement goal of more than one other person in my immediate circles. So to be in kind of community with other folks, to have a developmental team or some buddies where you would actually know what their improvement goals are in addition to knowing yours. It's incredible how we can draft off of other people's development and growth. It inspires us and teaches us to see others doing it. And then I regularly meet with a group for support and accountability on each other's improvement goals. Sometimes when I do this work with folks, they say, well, yeah, I've got people I know if I ever need them, I can call them. They'll be there for me. That's terrific. But what I want to suggest is that you want to have people that you're in regular conversation with already with regard to your own improvement, your own development. So tally up your scores and let's just see what folks might have there if you would enter in the chat again. Okay, so making development a team sport. So we're more kind of in the middle here with folks. So let me offer some thoughts, further thoughts on that. Okay, so you can ask yourself, in my circles, who would make good partners? Who would be folks that I would like to be kind of in regular conversation with for mutual support and accountability? And think about a regular group of 2 to 4 people. So it could be one other person, could be 2 or 3 other people. We found that 3 or 4 is a good number, but 2 can work. If you get more than 4, then it tends to sort of dilute a bit of the effectiveness. But think about a group of 2 to 4, and also think about folks that you might just meet with as part of an overarching system of peer and mentor support. So folks that you might have coffee with this one person, you know, every other week at Tuesdays at 7:30. You might have dinner with another person once a month on the third Friday of every month. You might go for a walk with this other person. You might see someone you think of as a mentor, maybe every month or 2 months to see him. So create this little ecology of peer and mentor support for yourself. And you can see some examples of that and see how some people do it in the workplace in chapter 7 there. All right, the fourth big dimension here for applying developmental intelligence in your own work and life. In the past week, I've written down my reflections on an improvement goal I'm working on. So even if it was 5 minutes, I've written down a plan for taking action on my improvement goal or goals this week. So I've actually planned ahead a little bit. I've committed something in writing. And I have a set protocol that I follow for reflecting on my progress on my improvement goals. So 1, 2, 3, or 4 for each of those. Okay, I invite you to go ahead and enter into the chat. Okay, so I see more 6s and 8. All right, yeah, nope, 3. And I can relate. And K is at 11. Okay, so I can just say if there were even just one thing, that small thing that you might try as a result of our time together, just try this. Get a little journal book, okay? Do it electronically, whatever way works for you. 5 minutes even, just to give yourself a chance to step back and observe yourself a little bit from the past week, okay, or the past day, however frequently you're doing this, okay? Let me offer a couple of other thoughts related to this dimension, okay? So in terms of a protocol, you can ask yourself, what happened when I did my experiment, when I did a little test, when I tried something different? What does that tell you about any of your old assumptions? Or what assumptions might that surface for you? What's another way of looking at it? What's an alternate interpretation? And what experiment could I try next? I invite you to think of yourself as a kind of researcher. Put yourself in the mindset of someone who's sort of applying the scientific method to your own development, and the scientific method being like, I have a hypothesis, I have a theory, I have an assumption, and you're just going to test it. You're just going to try little things to see, is it really true? If delegating is the thing you're working on, could I delegate something and see, did they really screw it up? How did I delegate it to them? Might there be something there that I could test or try a little differently? What's an alternate interpretation of what happened, and who could I delegate something to next to see what happens? Again, a combination of chapters 6 and 7 in our book would give you some good ideas and thoughts around that. Last dimension we'll look at before we step back a little bit further. So this is holding a developmental mindset. This is more about kind of your approach to development. If you think of these 4 other things, the 4 other things of focusing on one improvement goal, of making development a team sport, of surfacing and testing old assumptions, of writing things down, in a sense, those are kind of technical dimensions. You can say, okay, let me try each one of those things. But the idea is to have a developmental mindset while you're doing it. So some indicators related to that. In the past week, I've acknowledged a mistake I made to at least one other person. So I've said publicly something that I did that was a mistake. In the past month, I've taken on, a project or an activity just to see what I could learn from it. Okay. And I'll just step back just for a second and just say, in part, in significant part, I took on doing this presentation just to see what I might learn from it. This presentation that we're going through right now actually did not exist a month ago, and it would not have existed if I hadn't committed to Benny, who is now my dear friend. If I hadn't committed to Benny that I was going to do it, if I hadn't kind of thrown my hat over the wall and said, okay, I got to go get that hat. I can't just leave it there. Okay. And then the last one, I approach my development with a spirit of curiosity, experimentation, and play. Okay. So how did you score yourself on those items? All right. So higher, excellent. All right. Developmental, great question. Developmental mindset compared to a growth mindset, very similar. Okay, lots of overlap. I want to suggest that developmental mindset is more concerned with, or includes, put it that way, includes more attention to the old assumptions, the old mental models that are holding us back. Okay, but I know Bob Keegan and I'm just blanking on the woman who's Carol Dweck. Bob Keegan and Carol Dweck are actually great friends and colleagues as well. So there's lots of overlap between the two. All right. So let me offer a couple of thoughts on that, and then we're going to tally up. Okay. For holding that developmental mindset, someone I know, a wise person I know, I'm paraphrasing them. If you were to remind yourself, my growth and development is too important to take myself too seriously. Okay. My growth and development is too important to take myself too seriously. Enter in, spirit of play. I'm going to try stuff. And something interesting could happen if I were to lighten up even a little right now. All right. Let's total up. Okay. So you had 5 sections, 5 dimensions. Invite you to go ahead and add up your scores. And if your total scores were on the 46 to 60 range, somewhere in that range, I say good growing. You're on or near the orange curve. If you're in the 31 to 45 range, keep growing. You're on your way toward the orange curve, and you might try some of the one or more of the little suggestions or tips that we had, and going to offer you something else as well. And if you're in the 15 to 30 row range, perhaps it's time to get growing. You could be falling behind the curve. In the world that we're in right now, if each of us are not developing ourselves, and if we're not part of an organization, and you can probably sort of extrapolate a bit in terms of what I've shared here, that if you had a whole organization that was applying developmental intelligence, the individuals were applying it, and the organization itself was also creating structures and practices that were widely used across the organization, you can imagine what it would be like to get on that orange curve. And the thought I would leave you with as it relates to this is our perspective is in the 21st century. It's the organizations that are able to do the best job of growing their people individually and collectively over time. Those are going to be the big winners. And it's the individuals who are more deliberate about their own organizations, about their own development, that are not only going to be able to thrive in the world that we're in now more, but you're going to have sort of that satisfaction, that experience of your own unfolding, your own further development. Painful at times, no doubt, but the satisfaction of kind of giving birth to continuously to a new you, a bigger and better version of yourself. All right. So I promised another alternative. In addition to any of those tips, you could try one of our sort of offerings is something we call a developmental sprint, where you'd be joining with other folks to take a ride up Mount Development here. It's 4 weeks, 8 to 10 hours total time commitment over those 4 weeks. You'd make some traction on an improvement goal. You'd build your developmental intelligence. We have an offering that's coming up. Our next one is August 14th, and you can check it out at our website. All right. I'm going to stop sharing there and just check in to see if anyone has any quick questions or comments before I bid you well.
There's a quick question, and then there's 2 questions that you can answer them afterwards in the chat. But if we last like 30 minutes question before we move on because of the schedule.
Yes.
They might take a short-term firefighting too seriously?
It might. And so it's not to say that firefighting isn't important. So it's not to sort of lay down, big obligations that we might have, or to set aside, big things that are urgent. But it's in the midst of engaging? Can you engage with the perspective of, what can I learn from this experience? How can I maybe try something a little bit different than what I would otherwise do? Okay, so it's not, gee, I'm just going to take lots of naps and sort of withdraw. But can you engage in a way that is just a little more playful? Can you engage with a little bit more of a spirit of experimentation? Okay, that's the idea. All right, that may cover at least one, if not both of the questions there.
Yeah,
so
and
Benny,
you can answer the second one in the chat. You're more than welcome, and we'll be happy to hear more from you.
okay.
Andy said, thank you so much.
Fantastic, Benny. Thank you. Okay, best wishes for the rest of the conference. Okay,
thank you so
everyone.
much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Okay, bye-bye now.